When I came back from my sister's, his bed was empty. That's the first thing I noticed. Not the mail on the hall table, not the faint smell of bleach in the air, but the empty space in the corner of the living room. It was a big, worn-out plaid cushion, frayed at the edges where he used to chew on it as a puppy. For 15 years, that cushion was never empty for long. I put my handbag down on the chair. My son, Leo, was standing by the kitchen doorway, wiping the counter. His wife, Sarah, was on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. The silence in the house felt wrong. It was too clean, too still. "Where's Rex?" I asked. Leo didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the counter, wiping a spot that was already clean. That's when I knew. Before a single word was spoken, I knew something terrible had happened. When a man can't look his own mother in the eye, he's carrying a truth too heavy for his own spine. "Mom," he started, his voice a little too gentle, a little too rehearsed. We took him to a shelter. He was getting so old, and he was in pain. It was for his own good, the kindest thing to do." Sarah looked up from her phone, her face a perfect mask of sympathy. "He's at peace now, Helen. No more suffering." I didn't say anything. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't look at either of them. My gaze was fixed on that empty bed. I walked over to it slowly, my legs feeling like they were moving through water. I knelt down, the way I did 1,000 times a day to scratch his ears, and I laid my hand flat on the plaid cushion. It was still warm. Not warm from the sun, but the deep, lingering warmth of a sleeping body. The heat of him was still there, a ghost in the fabric. They hadn't even waited for his scent to fade. And as my palm rested on that warmth, a different voice echoed in my head, a kind, cheerful voice from just that morning. It was Dr. Evans, our vet. He had called me while I was at my sister's, just to give me the results from Rex's senior checkup. "Helen, the news is fantastic," he'd said. I could almost hear the smile in his voice. "His blood work is perfect for a dog his age, heart strong as an ox. That new arthritis medication is working wonders. He's a happy old man." I remember the wave of relief that washed over me. The last of my savings, nearly $2,000, had gone into those tests, those x-rays, that fancy new medicine. And it was worth every single penny. Because Rex wasn't just a dog. He was my heartbeat, the steady, furry presence that got me through the lonely nights after my husband passed. He was my reason to get up in the morning. "Dr. Evans had continued, "So, are you still planning on picking him up from the boarding facility tomorrow? Or do you want to get him today? He's having a grand time here. The nurses are spoiling him rotten." I'd left Rex at the vet's clinic for 2 days while I visited my sister. They have a little pet hotel there. It was clean and safe, and I knew he'd be looked after. I told the doctor I'd be there tomorrow morning, as planned. He was in a hotel, not a shelter. He was healthy, not sick. He was waiting for me, not at peace. My son's words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. For his own good, the kindest thing to do. I stayed kneeling there for what felt like an eternity, my hand on that warm cushion. I could feel their eyes on my back, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the tears, the accusations, the drama. They were probably ready for it, had their excuses lined up. But all I felt was a profound, terrifying calm. It was the calm of a building after an earthquake, when the shaking has stopped and you're left standing in the rubble, seeing everything for what it truly is. In that moment, the woman they knew as their mother, the quiet, gentle woman who baked cookies and knitted sweaters, she died. She simply evaporated, and someone else took her place. I pushed myself up, my knees cracking a little. I didn't look at Leo or Sarah. I just walked past them, toward my bedroom. "I'm a little tired from the drive," I said, my voice sounding distant, as if it belonged to someone else. "I think I'll lie down for a bit." I heard Leo let out a small sigh of relief behind me. They thought they'd gotten away with it. They thought the old lady was just tired, that she'd grieve for a few days, and then it would be over. The problem of the old dog would be solved. They could redecorate, maybe put a new, modern lamp where his bed used to be. They could stop wasting my money on vet bills and save it for what really mattered: their future, my inheritance. I closed my bedroom door. The click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a lock turning, a final door closing on the life I had known. My family was on the other side of that door. They were now strangers, worse than strangers. They were enemies who wore the faces of people I loved. I didn't lie down. I walked over to the small desk by the window and sat down in the chair my husband had always used. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. It was something else. A cold, clear energy. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about anyone else's comfort. I wasn't worrying about being a good mother or a good mother-in-law. I was thinking about justice. I picked up the phone. My fingers dialed the number to the veterinary clinic from memory. It rang twice. "Dr. Evans' office. This is Maria speaking." "Maria, it's Helen," I said, my voice steady, measured. "Helen, Rex's owner." "Oh, hi, Helen. How was your trip?" "It was fine, thank you. Please, could you put me through to the doctor? It's an emergency." There was a pause, a moment of concern. Of course, one moment. When Dr. Evans came on the line, his voice was all business. "Helen, what's wrong? Is everything all right?" "Doctor," I said, keeping my voice low, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Under no circumstances is Rex to be released to anyone but me. Not my son, not his wife, no one. Do you understand?" "Well, yes, of course," he said, confused. "Leo just called about an hour ago, asking to pick him up. Said you were delayed. I told him you'd already arranged for tomorrow morning." The coldness in my veins turned to ice. They hadn't just lied about where he was. They had tried to get to him, to take him from the one safe place he had, to make their lie a reality. They were going to take him from the vet and dump him in a real shelter. A kill shelter, probably. The cheapest, quickest option. All to save a few dollars a week on dog food and arthritis pills. "Thank you, doctor," I said, my throat tight. "You did the right thing. I will be there first thing in the morning to pick him up. Do not let him out of your sight." "Helen, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine concern. For a second, I almost broke. I almost told this kind man, this practical stranger who cared more about my dog than my own son did, everything, but I didn't. The woman who was born in the living room a few minutes ago was not a woman who cried on the phone. She was a planner, an architect. "Everything is fine, doctor. I'll see you tomorrow." I hung up the phone before he could ask any more questions. My hand rested on the receiver for a moment. One call down. One part of my world secured. Now for the other part, the part they cared about. I took out my address book and flipped through the pages until I found the letter L, my lawyer. I'd used the same family firm for 40 years. They'd handled my husband's will, the sale of our first home, the setting up of my investment portfolio, a portfolio that Leo and Sarah knew nothing about. They saw me as a woman living on a modest pension in a paid-off house. They had no idea that my husband, a brilliant and careful man, had left me with a fortune of over $2 million. I never told them. I wanted them to love me, not for my money. I suppose you could say it was a test, a long, quiet test of their character. And today, they had failed spectacularly. My finger traced the number, then I picked up the phone again and dialed. "Good afternoon, Thompson and Sons." "Hello," I said, my voice as calm and clear as a winter morning. "This is Helen. I need to schedule an urgent appointment with Mr. Thompson. I need to change my will." Through the closed door, I could hear them in the living room. I heard Sarah laugh at something. It was a light, carefree sound, the sound of someone who thinks they have just solved a problem, the sound of someone who believes their future is secure. I sat there in the quiet of my room, holding the phone, and I thought about the price they had put on my love, the price they had put on a 15-year bond of loyalty and affection. It was the cost of dog food, the cost of vet bills. They had weighed my heart on a scale against a few $1,000s a year, and my heart had lost. They decided my love has a price, I thought to myself as I listened to the receptionist book my appointment for the following afternoon. Fine, I will show them the real price of their betrayal. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in my bed, listening to the sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of a floorboard upstairs as Leo went to the bathroom. Every normal domestic sound felt alien, like I was hearing it from a great distance. I wasn't in my home anymore. I was in their house, a guest in my own life, waiting for morning. When the sun finally came up, casting gray light through my window, I got dressed with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I chose a simple, practical tweed skirt and a cashmere sweater, the kind of clothes that say, "I am not to be trifled with." When I went into the kitchen, Sarah was already there, humming as she made a smoothie. She gave me a bright, brittle smile. "Morning, Helen. Sleep well?" "Like a stone," I lied, pouring myself a cup of black coffee I had no intention of drinking. Leo came in a few minutes later, already dressed for work. He kissed the top of my head, a gesture so automatic and hollow it was almost an insult. "Morning, Mom. Feeling better today?" Feeling better. They thought my grief for Rex was a 24-hour flu, something to be gotten over quickly so life could return to normal. Their normal. They chattered about their day, about a dinner party they were planning for the weekend, about a new car Sarah wanted. I sat there, stirring my coffee, the spoon making a small metallic scraping sound in the silence of my mind. They were talking about money. Not my money, specifically, but the idea of it, the ease of it, and I understood. Every conversation from now on would be about that. The dog was gone, the expense was gone, so the future could begin. I waited for a pause in their conversation. "Leo," I said, my voice even, "I need to borrow your car." He looked surprised. "My car? Why? Where are you going?" "I have an errand to run," I said, not offering any more. "I can drive you after work," he offered, a flicker of something, suspicion, control, in his eyes. "No," I said simply. "I need to go now. I'll be back in a few hours." He couldn't really refuse without looking like a tyrant. He reluctantly handed me the keys. Sarah watched the exchange, her smoothie blender momentarily forgotten. I could see the questions in her eyes, the quick calculation. An old woman, suddenly acting unpredictably. Was this part of the grief? Was it something they needed to manage? I didn't give them time to analyze it. I took the keys, picked up my handbag, and walked out the door. The fresh morning air felt like my first breath of freedom. I got into Leo's ridiculously large SUV. a car he insisted he needed for safety, and pulled out of the driveway without a backward glance. The drive to the vet's clinic was about 20 minutes. The whole way, I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove, my hands steady on the wheel. I was not a grieving old woman. I was on a rescue mission. I thought about Rex, alone in a kennel, probably confused, wondering where I was. He was a creature of routine. He knew the sound of my footsteps, the time I woke up, the specific squeak of the pantry door where his treats were kept. This disruption would be terrifying for him. My heart ached, not with sadness, but with a fierce, protective anger. They had done this to him, to us. When I walked into the clinic, the receptionist, Maria, gave me a warm, compassionate smile. "Helen, we weren't expecting you so early," Dr. Evans said tomorrow. "Our plans changed," I said. "I've come to take Rex home." She nodded, her smile never faltering, and made a call to the back. A few moments later, I heard it, a sound I knew better than my own name. The familiar click, click, click of his nails on the linoleum floor. And then he was there. A young nurse was holding his leash, and the moment he saw me, his whole body started to tremble. His old gray tail began to thump, slowly at first, then faster and faster, a frantic metronome of pure joy. He let out a soft whine, a sound that was half question, half accusation. "Where have you been?" I knelt down on the cold, clean floor, ignoring the protest from my knees. He rushed to me, burying his head in my chest, his entire body wriggling with a relief so profound it was almost painful to watch. I wrapped my arms around his warm, solid body and breathed in his scent, that familiar, comforting smell of old dog and biscuits. "Oh, my boy," I whispered into his soft, floppy ear. "My good boy." I held him there for a long time, just feeling the steady beat of his heart against my own. The nurse stood by discreetly, pretending to be busy with some paperwork. In that sterile, bright waiting room, I made a silent vow to him. I leaned in close, my lips brushing against his fur. "Now we will be together," I whispered, a promise sealed in the quiet of the morning. Always. I paid the bill for his boarding, bought an extra bag of his favorite liver treats, and we walked out into the sunshine together. He hopped into the passenger seat, his tail still wagging, looking at me with those deep, brown, trusting eyes. He had no idea what had happened. He only knew that I had come for him. And that was all that mattered. Our next stop was downtown, at the offices of Thompson and Sons, attorneys at law. It was an old firm housed in a building of granite and dark wood. It smelled of old paper, leather, and integrity. Mr. Thompson, a man now in his 60s who had taken over the practice from his father, was waiting for me. He had known me since I was a young woman. He had managed my husband's estate with quiet competence. He greeted me with a respectful handshake and ushered me into his office. "Helen, it's good to see you, though your call sounded urgent. Is everything all right?" "Everything is being put right, Robert," I said, sitting in one of the large leather chairs opposite his enormous desk. He sat down, folded his hands, and waited. He was a man who knew how to listen. "I need to make a change to my will," I stated. "A complete and total change." He raised an eyebrow slightly, the only sign of his surprise. "I see. And what did you have in mind?" "My current will leaves everything to my son, Leo." "Yes, that's correct," he confirmed. "I want to change that. I wish to leave my son Leo and his wife Sarah the sum of $1 each." Robert Thompson paused, his pen hovering over a fresh legal pad. He looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. He didn't ask why. He didn't gasp. He simply asked the necessary question, a nominal bequest, to ensure they cannot contest the will on the grounds of being forgotten. A wise move, And the remainder of the estate? Here it was, the moment of reallocation. I took a deep breath. The entirety of my estate, the house, the stocks, the bonds, every last penny I want to leave to one person. Dr. Evans, my veterinarian. Now, both of Robert's eyebrows went up. He put his pen down. Dr. Evans, he repeated slowly, as if testing the name on his tongue. May I ask if Dr. Evans is aware of this potential inheritance? He has no idea, I said. And he is not to be told. This is to be a surprise. The man is kind, he is decent, and he does his job with integrity. He looked after my dog when my own family would have discarded him. In my view, that makes him a far more worthy recipient of my husband's legacy than my own son. I explained nothing more. I didn't tell him the story of the empty bed or the lies. I didn't need to. My tone of voice, the cold finality in my words, was explanation enough. This wasn't an emotional whim. This was a judgment. Robert was silent for a full minute, studying my face. He was looking for signs of instability, of coercion, of senility. He found none. He found only resolve. Very well, Helen, he said at last, picking up his pen. I will have the new documents drawn up immediately. We will need 2 witnesses. My secretary and my junior partner can serve. Are you prepared to sign this today? I am, I said. An hour later, it was done. I sat at that large mahogany desk, the new will spread out before me. The legal language was dense, but the core of it was brutally simple. To my son Leo, I bequeath $1. To my daughter-in-law Sarah, I bequeath $1. And then the beautiful, liberating sentence. All the rest, residue, and remainder of my estate, both real and personal, I give, devise, and bequeath to Dr. Evans in gratitude for his kindness. I signed my name at the bottom. My signature was firm and clear. As the witnesses added their names, a wave of profound relief washed over me. It felt as if a great weight, one I hadn't even realized I was carrying, had been lifted from my shoulders. It was the weight of expectation, of false hope, of a love I kept giving that was never truly returned. I had put my house in order. I had protected my most valuable asset. My dear Rex and I had ensured that the rest of my assets would go not to greed and deceit, but to goodness and compassion. I walked out of that office and back into the afternoon Sunday. Rex was asleep in the car, his gray muzzle twitching as he dreamed. I got in, and for a moment, I just sat there, watching him. He was safe. I was in control. When I got home, I let Rex out into the garden and then brought his plaid bed back into the living room, placing it in its rightful corner. I filled his water bowl. Then I sat down in my favorite armchair, and he, after a few happy circles, curled up at my feet, laying his heavy head on my knee. The house was quiet, but it was a different quiet now. It was a silence filled not with absence and betrayal, but with peace, my peace. The peace of an architect who has just reviewed her final, perfect blueprint. They could have their dinner parties and their plans for a new car. They were living in a house of cards, and they didn't even know it. But I knew, and here, in my quiet corner, with my dog's warm weight on my lap, I was finally, truly, safe. For the next week, I lived in a state of quiet observation. It was like watching a play where I was the only one who had read the final act. I moved through my days with a calm that seemed to unsettle them more than any argument would have. I was polite but distant. I answered their questions, but offered nothing more. The warmth they had taken for granted was gone. replaced by a cool, smooth surface they couldn't get a grip on. Rex's presence was, of course, the biggest mystery to them. When I brought him home, Leo's face went pale. Sarah's jaw tightened into a thin, angry line. "Mom, what is this?" Leo demanded, standing in the living room doorway as Rex happily trotted over to his water bowl. "I thought we agreed. He was sick." I looked up from the book I was reading. "You agreed," I said softly. "I did not, and as it turns out, he wasn't sick. Dr. Evans gave him a clean bill of health. A slight case of arthritis, but that's all. I have his medical report, if you'd like to see it." The lie was exposed, hanging naked and ugly in the air between us. Leo had the decency to look ashamed. He couldn't meet my eyes. He just mumbled something about a misunderstanding and retreated to his study. Sarah, however, was made of harder stuff. She stared at me, her eyes narrowed. She wasn't ashamed. She was furious that her plan had been thwarted. She saw Rex not as a living creature, but as a problem that had inconveniently returned. "Well, I hope you know what you're doing," she said, her voice sharp. "He's a huge expense, Helen. And at your age," she let the sentence trail off. The unspoken words, "you could be spending that money on us," shimmering in the air. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I replied, turning a page in my book. The conversation was over. They started to watch me. I could feel their eyes on me as I measured out Rex's special joint-friendly kibble. I saw them exchange glances when I made an appointment for his grooming. They were recalibrating. The old, frail, easily manipulated mother was gone. This new version of me was an unknown quantity, and it made them nervous. They started treating me with a cloying, artificial kindness. Sarah would offer to make me tea. Leo would ask if I needed help carrying the groceries. It was a transparent, clumsy attempt to get back into my good graces, to regain control. They were like amateur chess players who had just lost their queen and were now desperately trying to protect their king. But they still didn't understand the scale of their loss. They thought they had lost a small battle over the dog. They had no idea they had already lost the entire war. The time had come to give them a glimpse of the truth. My plan was simple. I am not a theatrical person. I don't believe in grand, dramatic pronouncements. I believe in the quiet power of a single, well-placed fact. Mr. Thompson had, at my request, sent a confirmation letter to my home. It was standard practice. A simple one-page document on his firm's heavy, cream-colored letterhead. It didn't spell out the details of the changes, but it stated them in cold, legal language. "Dear Mrs. Helen, this letter is to confirm that the codicil to your last will and testament, as discussed and executed in our offices on October 12th, has been duly filed and recorded. Please keep this confirmation with your personal documents." That was all, but it was everything. I knew Sarah's habits. Every Tuesday, while I was out at my weekly bridge game, she would tidy up my study. It wasn't about cleaning. It was about information gathering. She'd straighten the papers on my desk, glance at my mail, check my bank statements if I'd left them out. She was looking for signs of decline, of confusion, of anything that would give her more leverage. She thought I didn't know, but old women see more than people give them credit for. We spend a lifetime watching, listening, learning the patterns of those around us. This Tuesday, I didn't go to my bridge game. I took Rex for a long, slow walk in the park instead. Before I left, I went into my study. I took the letter from Mr. Thompson out of its envelope and placed it on my desk blotter, slightly askew, as if I had just finished reading it, and set it down. I placed my reading glasses on top of it. It was a perfect little stage set, an invitation. When Rex and I returned an hour later, the house was silent. Leo was at work. Sarah's car was in the driveway. I knew where she would be. I walked quietly down the hall to my study. The door was slightly ajar. I heard a sharp, indrawn breath, then a frantic rustling of paper. I pushed the door open. Sarah was standing over my desk, the letter in her hand, her back to me. "Find anything interesting?" I asked, my voice calm. She jumped, spinning around. Her face was a mess of emotions, guilt, fear, and a rising tide of rage. She held up the letter as if it were a snake that had just bitten her. "What is this?" she hissed. "A codicil? What have you done, Helen? What have you changed?" "That," I said, walking past her to my chair, "is between me and my lawyer. This is about the dog, isn't it?" Her voice was rising, becoming shrill. "You're punishing us because of that stupid dog. We were trying to help you. We were trying to be responsible." "Responsible," I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "You lie to me. You attempt to steal and dispose of a member of my family, a creature I love more than anything, and you call that responsible?" Just then, Leo came home. He walked in to find his wife trembling with fury and me sitting calmly behind my desk. He saw the official-looking letter in Sarah's hand. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes darting between us. "Your mother has gone behind our backs," Sarah shrieked, thrusting the letter at him. "She's changed her will, Leo, she's cutting us out." Leo took the letter. He read the single, devastating sentence. I watched his face. I saw the confident veneer of the successful son crack and crumble in real time. He looked at me, and for the first time, he looked truly scared. The lazy assumption that had underpinned his entire life that one day my money would be his money had just been obliterated. "Mom?" His voice was a pathetic whisper. "What does this mean? It's because you're upset, right? We can fix this. I'm sorry about Rex. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." It was fascinating to watch. The apology that wouldn't come when he thought he had gotten away with his cruelty now spilled from his lips, desperate and cheap, the moment he realized his inheritance was at stake. I leaned back in my chair and gently stroked the head of Rex, who had settled at my feet. "There is nothing to fix, Leo. A thing that is broken cannot be fixed. It can only be replaced." "Replaced?" Sarah scoffed, her fear turning back into venom. "What does that even mean? Who else is there? You have no one else. You're going to leave everything to a charity? To some cat shelter?" I gave her a small, serene smile. "You are so certain that money is the most important thing in the world," I said softly. "You see a dog and you see an expense. I see a dog and I see loyalty. You see an old woman and you see a bank account with a timer on it. I see a life filled with memories and love you couldn't possibly comprehend." I stood up. The confrontation was over. The seed of doubt had been planted. Now, I would let it grow into the tree of their panic. "I'm going to make a pot of tea," I announced, as if we had just been discussing the weather. I walked toward the door, Rex trotting happily beside me. As I passed my son, I paused and put a hand on his arm. His muscles were tense, rigid with shock. "You should know, Leo," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, so only he could hear. "When you look at your inheritance, you are looking at 40 years of my husband's hard work. 40 years of him getting up before dawn, coming home late, sacrificing so that his family would be secure. That money is his legacy. It is a legacy of love and honor. I have simply decided to give it to someone who understands what those words mean." I left them standing there in my study, a useless piece of paper in their hands, the entire glittering golden future they had planned for themselves dissolving into dust around them. In the kitchen, as I filled the kettle, I could hear their voices begin to rise, first in panicked whispers, then in furious, bitter accusations. It had begun, the fallout, and I felt nothing but a quiet, profound, and unshakable sense of justice being done. The storm I had unleashed in the study didn't break immediately. It festered. For 2 days, a toxic silence filled the house. Leo and Sarah moved around me like ghosts, their faces pale and strained. They spoke to each other in hushed, urgent tones behind closed doors. I could feel the frantic energy radiating from them, the desperate searching for a strategy, a way to undo what they now suspected I had done. They were scrambling, trying to find a foothold on the smooth, cold cliff face of my resolve. They tried different approaches. Sarah attempted a tearful apology one afternoon, catching me in the garden. She spoke of stress, of financial worries, of how she'd only been thinking of my well-being. It was a pathetic performance, so transparent, I almost felt a flicker of pity for her. She didn't understand. She thought this was a negotiation. She thought my love was a commodity that could be bought back with a few counterfeit tears. I listened politely, said, "I see," and went back to pruning my roses. Leo tried the guilt approach. He brought up his children, my grandchildren. He spoke of their future, their college funds, the legacy their grandfather wanted for them. He painted me as a cruel, vindictive old woman, punishing innocent children for a simple mistake. "They had nothing to do with this, Mom," he said, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "Are you really going to take their future away from them over a dog? Their future is your responsibility, Leo, not mine," I replied, my voice gentle but firm. "And you have taught them a very valuable lesson, that the price of cruelty is higher than you can imagine." They were testing the walls of my fortress, looking for a crack, but they found only solid stone. The final confrontation came on a Thursday evening. I was in the living room, sitting in my armchair with a book in my lap and Rex sleeping peacefully at my feet. The house was quiet. I had just decided to go up to bed when they appeared in the doorway, standing side by side. They looked like a delegation sent to negotiate a surrender. Leo was holding the letter from the lawyer. His hand was shaking slightly. "Mom," he began, his voice tight, "we need to talk about this. We need to understand what this means." Sarah stood behind him, her arms crossed, her face a mask of cold fury. She was done with apologies. This was war. I placed a marker in my book and closed it gently. I looked at them, then down at Rex. I reached down and stroked his soft gray head. He stirred in his sleep, his tail giving a single sleepy thump against the carpet. He was my anchor, my truth. "What, precisely, do you want to understand?" I asked. "This letter," Leo said, waving it. "The will. What have you done? Sarah thinks. She thinks you've cut us out completely." "Sarah is very perceptive," I said quietly. The admission, so calm and direct, seemed to suck the air out of the room. Leo stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He had clearly expected denials, excuses, an emotional outburst he could manage. He was not prepared for a simple statement of fact. "But why?" he stammered. "Because of Rex?" "Mom, I know we handled that badly. I know it was wrong. I've apologized. What more do you want from me?" I looked at my son, my only child. I saw the man he had become, standing there in his expensive suit, his face a mixture of fear and entitlement. And I felt a deep, profound sadness, not for myself, but for him. He truly didn't get it. He thought the crime was getting caught. "It was never about what I want from you, Leo," I said, my voice remaining level, almost conversational. "It was about what I wanted for you. I wanted you to be a good man, the kind of man your father was. a man who understands that wealth is not measured in dollars, but in integrity, in kindness, in loyalty. I gestured to Rex, who was still snoozing at my feet. This old dog, I continued, has more integrity in his furry body than you two have shown in months. He has never lied to me. He has never calculated my worth. He has never seen me as a means to an end. He has only ever offered unconditional love. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes meeting Leo's. And you tried to throw him away, like a piece of trash. You stood in this very room and lied to my face, telling me he was suffering to make your betrayal more palatable. You didn't do it for his good, you did it for your own. You saw him as a leak in your inheritance, a small but steady drain on the fortune you were so impatient to get your hands on. That's not true, Sarah interjected, her voice sharp. We were worried about you. You were spending a fortune on him. My money, I corrected her gently, to spend as I see fit. You took away what you thought was my last joy, assuming I was too old and too weak to do anything about it. You thought I was stupid. You made a terrible miscalculation. I wasn't weak. I was just quiet. I leaned back in my chair, the finality of it all settling over me. The time for explanations was over. It was time for the verdict. So, to answer your question, Leo, what does this letter mean? I paused, letting the silence stretch. It means that I have decided to make a different kind of investment. I am moving my assets away from greed and into goodness. The legacy your father and I built will not be used to buy new cars or fund lavish dinner parties. It will go to a man who, without any thought of reward, showed kindness to a helpless animal. It will go to Dr. Evans. The name landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. Sarah gasped. The vet? You're giving our money, my children's money, to the vet? Have you lost your mind? She's gone insane, Leo. We have to do something. We can have her declared incompetent. I smiled a sad, weary smile. I assure you, I am perfectly competent. Mr. Thompson can attest to that, as can the psychiatrist he insisted I see before he would agree to draw up the new will. I passed with flying colors. Leo just stared at me, his face ashen. The fight had drained out of him, replaced by a hollow-eyed despair. He finally understood. It was real. It was over. There's nothing left to say, I said, my voice softening. I felt a strange sense of release. I had carried the burden of their expectations for so long. Now, I was free. This is my decision. It is final, legally and in every other way. You are, of course, welcome to stay in this house as long as I am alive, but we are no longer family. We are just people living under the same roof. I stood up slowly, my bones creaking a little. Rex woke up, stretched, and looked up at me, his tail wagging. It was time for his last walk of the evening. Now, if you'll excuse me, I said, walking towards the hall. Rex and I have our routine. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel their stunned silence behind me. I had given them my truth. I had declared my independence. I owed them nothing more. Not my money, not my forgiveness, not even my anger. As I clipped the leash onto Rex's collar, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. I had lost a son, but I had regained myself. The house was no longer a battleground. It was simply a place where I lived, with my dog, waiting for the rest of my life to begin, my real life, the one I had just bought and paid for with every penny I had. Living in that house after the final conversation was like living in a library after it has closed. All the books were still on the shelves, but the stories were over. There were no more words to be said. Leo and Sarah existed in my periphery. We shared a kitchen, a hallway, but we did not share a life. The silence between us wasn't angry anymore. It was empty. It was the silence of a concluded transaction. But I quickly realized that this emptiness was not an ending. It was a space waiting to be filled. For years, my life had been structured around my family. My husband, then my son, then his wife and children. My energy, my love, my quiet planning, it had all been directed towards them. Now, that channel was closed, but the river of my purpose was still flowing. It just needed a new direction. One morning, about a month after that final talk, I woke up and knew I could not stay in that house a day longer. It was haunted, not by ghosts, but by the specter of a life that was no longer mine. It was their house now, in spirit if not yet in deed. I was just a tenant, and my lease was up. I didn't pack much. A few suitcases with my clothes, my books, my husband's photograph, and of course, everything that belonged to Rex. I found a lovely little furnished apartment for rent in a quiet neighborhood across town. It was smaller, brighter, with a large balcony that overlooked a park. It was a place with no memories. It was perfect. I left a simple note on the kitchen table. I have moved out. The house is yours. I will have my lawyer contact you regarding the transfer of the title into your name. Helen. I wanted nothing from them, not even the bricks and mortar that had housed my entire adult life. A clean break. My first week in the new apartment was a quiet revelation. I discovered the simple joy of my own company. I took Rex for long walks in the new park. I found a little bakery that made scones almost as good as mine, and I sat on my balcony for hours, just watching the world go by. I was not lonely. I was free. But I knew this freedom was just the foundation. Now, I had to build something on it. The following Tuesday, I made an appointment to see Dr. Evans, not for Rex, who was thriving, but for myself. When I walked into his office, he greeted me with his usual warm, professional smile. Helen, good to see you. Has Rex's arthritis been flaring up? No, doctor. He's doing wonderfully, I said, taking the seat he offered. I'm here to talk to you about something else, a business proposal of sorts. He looked intrigued, leaning forward with his elbows on his desk. A business proposal? I'm all ears. I took a breath. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times. Dr. Evans, I began. I am a wealthy woman, very wealthy. My late husband was a prudent and successful man, and he left me with an estate worth over $2 million. I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but he remained silent, listening intently. I have recently made some significant changes to my will, I continued. As it stands now, upon my death, the entirety of that estate is to be left to you. The silence that followed was absolute. Dr. Evans stared at me, his friendly, professional demeanor completely gone, replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked around his small, tidy office, as if seeing it for the first time. Me? He finally managed to say, his voice a hoarse whisper. Mrs. Helen, I don't understand. That's insane. I can't accept that. I'm your vet, for heaven's sake. I've done nothing to deserve. You did everything, I interrupted gently. You did your job with kindness and integrity. You were honest with me. You protected my dog when I couldn't. In my book, that is more than enough. However, I paused, letting him process the initial shock. I'm not here today to talk about my death. I'm here to talk about my life and yours. I leaned forward, my hands clasped on his desk. I know you can't accept the money for yourself. I never expected you to. A man who would take money like that is not the man I would have chosen in the first place. This isn't for you, Dr. Evans. It's for the animals. He looked confused. The animals? Yes, I said, my voice filled with the energy of my new purpose. I don't want my legacy to be a number in a bank account that gets handed over when I'm gone. I want to build something, now, with you. I want to establish a foundation, a state-of-the-art animal sanctuary and rescue center, a place where old dogs like my Rex aren't considered a burden, a place where abandoned, abused, and forgotten animals can be healed, cared for, and find loving homes. I will provide the capital, all of it, but it needs a leader. It needs a heart. It needs someone with the expertise and the compassion to run it. It needs you. I watched his face as he absorbed my words. The shock was slowly being replaced by something else, a dawning sense of wonder, of possibility. A foundation, he murmured, a sanctuary. I want to name it the Rex Foundation, I said, a smile touching my lips for the first time, in honor of the old dog who started it all. I see it clearly, Doctor. A beautiful facility, with spacious kennels, a top-tier veterinary clinic on site, large fields for the dogs to run in, cozy rooms for the cats, a place of hope. He was silent for a long time, looking past me, out the window, as if he could see the very place I was describing. I could see the wheels turning in his mind. The vet who spent his days patching up animals in a small clinic was now being offered the chance to save them on a scale he had never dreamed of. "Why me?" he asked again. But this time the question was different. It wasn't a rejection. It was a genuine inquiry. "Because you are a good man, Dr. Evans," I said simply. "And I have decided that my life's work, my husband's legacy, will be to empower good people to do great things. My family saw my money as a prize to be won. I see it as a tool to be used. I'm offering you the tool. Will you help me build something with it?" He looked at me, and I saw tears welling in his eyes. He wasn't a man who cried easily. I knew that. But this wasn't about money. This was about a shared belief, a shared love. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Helen, I will." That was the beginning. My life, which had shrunk to the size of a quiet living room and an empty dog bed, suddenly expanded into a future I couldn't have imagined. I was no longer just a quiet old woman. I was a founder, an architect, once again. We spent the next few months in a whirlwind of activity. We met with lawyers to set up the foundation's charter. We met with architects to design the facility, with me poring over blueprints with the same intensity my husband once reserved for his business plans. I insisted on specific details: heated floors in the kennels, a dedicated quiet room for traumatized animals, a beautiful sun-drenched cattery. Dr. Evans was transformed. The weary vet became a passionate, tireless leader. He scouted locations, hired staff, and developed protocols for animal care that were second to none. We found a perfect plot of land, 10 acres of rolling green hills just outside the city. The day we broke ground was a beautiful, clear autumn afternoon. I stood on that patch of earth with Dr. Evans by my side. A small crowd had gathered: staff, volunteers, a few local reporters who had gotten wind of the story. I was asked to say a few words. I stood at the small podium, with Rex sitting calmly at my feet, and looked out at the hopeful faces. "They say that a person's legacy is what they leave behind for their family," I began, my voice clear and steady. "For a long time I believed that, but I've come to learn that a true legacy isn't what you leave for people. It's what you leave inside of people. It's the kindness you inspire, the hope you build. Today, We are not just breaking ground on a building. We are planting a seed of compassion. This place will be a testament to the idea that every life, no matter how small or old or broken, has value. It is the real inheritance I received from my husband, and it is the only one I am interested in passing on. I took a ceremonial golden shovel and plunged it into the soft earth. The crowd applauded. Dr. Evans shook my hand, his eyes shining with gratitude and a shared sense of purpose. Rex barked, a single, happy sound. And in that moment, standing on my own piece of the future, I felt no anger, no bitterness. My son and his wife were a distant memory, a closed chapter in a book I was no longer reading. They had wanted my money, and in a way I had given it to them. I had transformed it from something they could covet and squander into something they could never touch. A living, breathing monument to everything they had failed to understand. A year. It's funny how a single year can feel longer and more meaningful than the 10 that came before it. The grand opening of the Rex Foundation was last spring. The day was perfect, a clear blue sky, a gentle breeze that carried the scent of freshly cut grass, and the happy, chaotic sound of life. The facility is more beautiful than even I imagined from the blueprints. It's not a shelter, it's a campus. There are low, welcoming buildings with big windows, sprawling green fields fenced in dark wood, and a network of walking paths lined with young trees. The sound of barking here isn't the desperate, lonely sound of a pound. It's the sound of play, of excitement, of dogs who know they are safe. I have a favorite spot. It's a simple wooden bench under a large, shady oak tree overlooking the main exercise field. From here, I can watch everything. I can see the young volunteers, teenagers mostly, laughing as they throw frisbees for a pair of energetic Labradors. I can see Dr. Evans, he insists. I call him Robert now, walking with a new arrival, a timid little terrier mix, speaking to it in a low, soothing voice. I can see the life, the joy, the purpose that grew from the ugliest moment of my life. There's a small bronze plaque on the bench. Robert had it made as a surprise for the opening. It reads, "From Helen and Rex, in memory that true loyalty is priceless." Rex is here with me, of course. He's 16 now, and his steps are slower. His muzzle is almost entirely white. He spends most of his time dozing in the sun, but he is a king in this place. The staff all greet him by name. The volunteers save him the best treats. He is the founding father of this little kingdom, and he seems to know it. He lies at my feet now, his head on my shoes, letting out the deep, contented sighs of a dog who knows he is profoundly loved. This is my new family. Not a family of blood, but a family of choice. A family bound by a shared mission. The young volunteers, full of bright, earnest energy, treat me like a beloved grandmother. They bring me drawings their dogs have supposedly painted. They tell me about their school exams and their first loves. One of them, a sweet girl named Chloe with braces and a fiery red ponytail, often just comes and sits with me, not saying much, just sharing the quiet of the afternoon. They don't want anything from me. They just like me. It's a feeling so pure, so simple, it still sometimes brings tears to my eyes. A few weeks ago, on a day much like this one, Robert's assistant, a kind young woman named Maya, came out to my bench. She was holding a small stack of mail. "For the foundation," she said, handing me a few bills and donation slips. Then she held out a single, thin envelope. "And this one came for you, personally." I knew the handwriting instantly. It was Leo's. It had been over a year since I had seen it, and it looked different, smaller, somehow, less confident. The address was written in a spidery, almost shaky script. "Thank you, Maya," I said. She smiled and went back to the main building. I held the letter in my hands for a long moment. Rex stirred at my feet, sensing a change in my stillness. I patted his head. "It's all right, my boy. Just a ghost." I opened it. The letter was 3 pages long, front and back. It was filled with all the words I had once longed to hear, and which now meant nothing at all. He was sorry. He was deeply, profoundly sorry. He wrote that not a day went by that he didn't regret his horrible mistake. He said Sarah had been a bad influence, that he had been weak, that he was ashamed. He wrote about the house. He said it felt empty, that my absence was a cancer in it. He wrote about the grandchildren, how they missed me, and then, inevitably, he wrote about the money. He didn't ask for it directly. He was more clever than that. He wrote that he had been forced to take on a second mortgage on the house, my house, and that things were difficult. He wrote that he understood my decision, but that he hoped, in time, I could find it in my heart to forgive him, to let him be my son again. I read all 3 pages, my face betraying no emotion. The words were just ink on paper. They had no power. The man who wrote them was a stranger to me now, a character from a sad story I once knew. There was no anger, no pain, no flicker of satisfaction. There was only a vast, quiet distance. He was on one side of a canyon, and I was on the other, and there was no bridge. I folded the letter neatly. I was reading a book at the time, a collection of poems. Without a second thought, I slipped the folded letter between the pages to mark my spot. It was useful, after all. It could serve a purpose. It was just the right thickness to be a good bookmark. Just then, Chloe, the red-haired volunteer, came running over, her face bright with excitement. In her arms was a tiny, wriggling ball of black and white fluff. A puppy, no more than 8 weeks old, with enormous paws and clumsy, stumbling feet. "Helen, you have to meet the new guy," she said, her voice a happy whisper. "We're calling him Patches. He was found in a box by the side of the road." She gently placed the puppy in my lap. He was so small, so warm and fragile. He looked up at me with big, dark, confused eyes. And then, with the unearned, absolute trust that only a puppy can possess, he licked my chin. I felt a laugh bubble up from my chest, a genuine, happy sound. Rex lifted his head, gave the puppy a cursory sniff of approval, and then went back to sleep. I held that little bundle of new life, looked out over the green fields filled with rescued souls, and I thought about the journey that had brought me here. They thought they were taking away an old dog. That's how small their world was. They couldn't see the whole picture. They didn't realize they weren't getting rid of a burden. They were setting my chief financial advisor free, and he gave me the single best piece of investment advice I've ever received. Put your fortune into whatever wags its tail, not into whatever holds out its hand. And here, in this place, surrounded by my dividends of unconditional love, I was finally, truly home.